So we're in our third Sunday of Advent, and the first 2 weeks we talked about John the Apostle, about his very cosmic view of this presence of God, the Lord Jesus, that was appearing among us. Then last week we looked at Matthew's view, also one of the 12 apostles of Jesus, and how he came and was presenting himself and talking about the prophecies. This morning we'll look at the Gospel of Mark and what Mark's view is of how it presents who this Jesus is. Now, Mark was not one of the 12 that walked with Jesus day by day, and so he's deliberately writing a record. So he's doing it through interviews, and he's especially listening and capturing what it is that he is. I mean, he wants you to know who this Jesus is that has changed his life. And so he's looking at that and very focused on that. He's so excited about it that he doesn't spend time talking about how Jesus got here. He's just like, here he is. He's growing up. He's the Son of God. He's this divine presence of God among us. As Tony Evans says, Jesus is God's selfie. You want to know what God looks like? He says, here, this is me. Jesus is the exact image of who God the Father is. And so he's busy doing that. He's proclaiming this is, and so the first half of Mark portrays this magnificent view of this is Jesus being active in ministry, doing all these wonderful things, carrying out all these miracles, and then it makes a change. And it begins to show Jesus as this person who suffers, as this person who is carrying your weight upon his shoulders, is what the message actually becomes. So, also out of a Tony Evans message, let's go to the next slide, where there should be a first one that talks about who am I? I am what I was. So here's the statements. I am what I was. I was not what I am now, but now I am called both. You follow that? I am what I was. It's talking about God's divinity in the presence of Jesus, right? I was not what I am now. That is, the Son of God was not always human. That's an action that happened. I was not what I am now. I am human, but I was not always human. And now I am called both. I am both the Son of God and the Son of Man. I'm both this fully human and fully divine being that is what brings heaven and earth together. I do it in who I am, and then by my death, I cross the chasm so that we can walk on that bridge from our alienation and our isolation into the presence of God's wholeness and fullness for all of eternity. So when we look into the passage in just a bit, we'll see that Jesus is referring to himself in this term, the Son of Man. Now, the Son of Man is not just Jesus saying, I'm not thinking a lot of myself, I'm just a man. It's not just saying I'm human. It's saying the term the Son of Man was how Ezekiel referred to himself. So in this first century Palestine, among the Jewish people, when Jesus is saying Son of Man, they're hearing their prophet Ezekiel talk. And so they're hearing, these are words from the Lord coming to us. They're not only hearing Ezekiel, they're hearing Daniel as well, where Daniel has this dream, this vision, and there's this Ancient of Days, he calls him, who's a God. This is in Daniel 7. And then there's this Son of Man that appears before the Ancient of Days. And the Ancient of Days gives this Son of Man the power to rule the earth forever and ever. And all will come and will bow before him. So it's saying that the Son of Man is carrying this reality of who God is upon him. So these terms, Son of God and Son of Man, kind of merge with each other, as indeed they do, right? In the name of Jesus. So when we hear this word son of, it doesn't mean less than. It's not like, well, son, maybe someday you'll grow up and amount to something. It's not that kind of. It's rather like this is of the same nature and character. In this day, it would have been very common for the sons to have the same occupation as what their fathers had. And so it's like you're carrying on that line. You're continuing this name. You are what that was. So my father was a school teacher. So I guess it would mean that I would be a school teacher if we lived in that culture, right? Except I guess it's a little complicated because his father was a farmer. So if he had followed that, then I'd be a farmer, and so on it goes. So that's not our culture, obviously. But this, so when Jesus is referring to Son of Man, it's meaning this very intentional, I am here from God, I'm carrying his word. Listen up. Pay attention to what's happening here. And so let's pick this up in Mark chapter 8, verse 27. Mark 8, verse 27. Jesus and his disciples left Galilee and went up to the villages near Caesarea Philippi. As they were walking along, he asked them, "Who do people say I am?" "Well," they replied, "some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, and others say you're one of the prophets." Then he asked them, "But who do you say I am?" Peter replied, "You're the Messiah," or "You are the Christ." But Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. Then Jesus began to tell them that the Son of Man must suffer many terrible things and be rejected by the elders, the leading priests, the teachers of rules. Peter took him aside and began to reprimand him for saying such things. Jesus turned around and looked at his disciples, then reprimanded Peter. "Get away from me, Satan," he said. "You are seeing things merely from a human point of view, not from God's." Then calling the crowd to join his disciples, he said, "If any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross, and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. If you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the good news, you will save it. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul? Is anything worth more than your soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my message in these adulterous and sinful days, the Son of Man will be ashamed of that person when he returns to the glory of his Father with the holy angels." First question Jesus is asking here, who do people say I am? And if you would go out and do a survey when cars are stopped at the traffic light right here, you'd get responses like this. You get responses like, "Mind your own business," right? And then you'd say, "Well, he was this holy man. He taught us good things." Or he was a major religious figure like Muhammad and Buddha and such like. Or, yeah, I'm not even sure that he really existed at all. Those would be some of the responses. And then the question, though, Jesus doesn't stop there, right? He's like, what's everybody saying? And he's not looking to discover what his identity should be, right? He's very quite assured. But then he brings it down more personally. He's like, who do you say I am? What's your experience? What's the revelation of who Jesus is into your life and your heart? And then at the end of the passage that we read this morning, it's like, are you ashamed of this, or are you staking your life on it? Are you willing to be known that this is the truth of the world and you are expressing it? You're confessing it. Confession means you're agreeing with the truth. Sometimes we think it just means we admit to something we did that was wrong, because we often hear it in terms of you're confessing your crime in court or something like that, you know. But a confession is you are agreeing with the truth, so that you're willing to say to other people, Jesus is this divine one and this human one, this Son of God and this Son of Man, and it is changing my life and will change yours as well as you allow this to become part of your life. So did you catch here in this passage? I told you that the first half of Mark is really proclaiming Jesus is God, he's this powerful one. And then the second half of Mark is really talking about how Jesus is this one that suffers and bears our burdens among with us. And this is part of this is a passage where that switches. Because here comes Peter's declaration. You are the Messiah. You are the Christ. You are the one that's the anointed, chosen one from God to come and save us. Now, if this was a movie, what would be happening here? Well, it depends on the movie. Either this is the climax of the movie, where Jesus is like, finally, people know who I am, and there'd be the theme music that would come on, and they'd go riding off, and the rest would be left for your imagination about how this would be lived out. Or this would be the start of Jesus and Peter and the other people saying, okay, let's go get him. And they'd be marching into Jerusalem and taking it over, and they'd be declaring, since I am the Messiah, since I am the anointed one, this is how it's going to go down right now at this moment, right? But Jesus twists it. It's like he throws his hand grenade into the plot and messes up what Peter thinks he means when he professes who Jesus is, what the Jewish leaders think is supposed to happen when the Messiah comes. All of that gets messed up because after this confession that you're the Messiah, you're the Christ, then in verse 31, Jesus begins to tell them that the Son of Man must suffer. Is the king supposed to suffer? The king's supposed to have a whole kingdom to make sure that the king does not suffer, right? That all is there serving so that the king embodying, and that's not arrogance of the king, it's just what a king's supposed to be, representing the wholeness of the country, what the country's supposed to be about. So here the king goes and says, but I'm going to suffer, I'm going to actually die, and then I'll rise again. And Peter is like, Jesus, could you come over here and talk to me, with me a little bit? We're going to go off here. It's so cute. Yeah, thanks, Leah. And it's like, Jesus, this isn't how it's going to go down. You're going off a script. Kings are not supposed to suffer. Messiahs are supposed to win this thing. I just signed up for you to be the Messiah. And now you tell me that we're going down? Okay?
It's my script.
Exactly right. Jesus is like, who's writing the plot here? You thought you were the author of this, Peter? Exactly right. And And so Jesus begins to make this march to Jerusalem, but not to take the throne, but to take the cross. To take this way that he's suffering not because of what he did, but because of what we did. And he's stepping into that place and positioning himself there. So Jesus says, I must suffer, I must be rejected, I must be killed, I will rise again. This is a surprising message. And if we have this, God suffers. Gasp. God is not supposed to suffer. And in fact, this is one of the major debates between Islam and Christianity. Jesus can't be the divine one. He can't be God. Why? Because Jesus suffered. And we all know that God does not suffer. God's above suffering. How does he follow through? It's not that crazy in how our minds want to think. If God does not suffer and I'm with God, what's the next line? Then I won't suffer either. Only usually we play it backwards. Because the tendency of the human heart is to create the God that we want to have, not God as he reveals himself to us. I don't want to suffer. The chances go up if I have a God who does not suffer. Let's find him. So do you want a God that you're creating? The Bible talks about this a lot, about the gods that are carved out of wood, the gods that are carved out of stone, the gods that are carved out of the desires of our human heart. And we get to have that God, which is an idol, or we get to have the true God, which is this full revelation of who he says he is. And he says, I'm coming among you. I am experiencing what you experience. I am human so that I can suffer. We could spend the rest of the morning talking about suffering and what causes our suffering. And the Buddhists would say it's just our desire. So you stop desiring to be well, then you won't suffer for being sick. Or you could say it's because of our wrong choices, our greed, our hate, our selfishness. And that would be true. You could just say it's because there's a fallen world. This world's under a curse. The second law of thermodynamics has been put into effect. Things wear out. They break down. There is this downward spiral unless there is an intervention, a mediator that comes in and turns back the curse. Suffering can be also just it's like sometimes you suffer most deeply not because of physical things, right? But because of emotional wounds. And one of the deepest ones is when somebody that you love rejects you or harms you in some way. So if God is infinite, and the deepest type of suffering is when people reject him, and his love for every person in this world is full and abundant and infinite, and many people are rejecting him, what does that tell you about the suffering, broken, pain-filled heart of God? So Jesus can say, I experienced what you experienced. I know the pain. I know the sorrow. I've been in that place where people have rejected and turned their backs from me, where I thought things were going to turn out a certain way, where people would be following me, and they said, no, that cost is too high. I'm going away. I want the God that will help keep me comfortable. rather than a God that will lead me into how I can be with him to change the world. So the second part is, God doesn't just suffer, God suffers for you. God suffers for you. He enters into this broken world, he lays aside our reality, and he joins us in our world, and he takes all the abuse and evil and even death itself, and he takes it upon himself. Do we have the photos in there? This is God's suffering. This is the sacrificial lamb upon the altar that passes over. This was a sacrifice that caused people to be saved when they had this lamb and the blood of the lamb painted upon their doorposts way back in Exodus as the Israelites were about to be set free. But now it's not a lamb upon an altar of sticks. The altar is a cross. And there the Son of God is, absorbing the evil and hurt of the world upon himself, absorbing that curse, drawing it back and placing it upon himself, taking your part of it and saying, we're releasing you from those binds, we're releasing you from those chains, that sinful oppression, the judgments that come upon you, the consequences of the shame and the guilt that comes because of choices that you've made, all of that, it comes unto me, and I will be the one that absorbs that, takes it upon myself, breaks that curse, so that you have a future that's free, that's whole, that's life-giving, that's unimaginable, because Jesus takes that place and says, I got a deal for you. I'll take on your weaknesses, your brokenness, your sinfulness, your addictions. But then I need somebody to live out my life. That's what I want from you, to live out the life of Jesus in that way instead. So God's suffering for you is for a purpose. God's suffering for you is to reconcile us with him. Sometimes when we talk about, reconciling means, to bring it together, to make it even, right? But it's not compromise. God's like, I'll come and bring your transformation so that your righteousness fits who I am. I'm not going to come down and only be 50% God. If you can get up to being 50% good. See, it doesn't work that way. He takes our place so that the reconciliation can happen. Then he calls the crowd together, just to make sure that this isn't something special that he's saying for those 12. If any, verse 34, if any of you wants to be my follower. Any takers on that? Anybody want to be the follower of Jesus? Here's what it takes. You give up your own way. You take up the cross. And you follow. You step out. You give up your own way. Your own way. There's a verse in Proverbs that says, there's a way that seems right to man, but in the end it's the way of death. Where we give up the way that we think it should be in order to say, Jesus, I need your revelation, your life-giving whole revelation, so that we experience your truth and your life and don't end up marooned on a wrong peak. And then this, what do you gain if you have the whole world and you lose your own soul? Probably heard of the story of one of the tycoons that started the capitalistic industrial enterprise, Rockefeller, Vanderbilt, or something. When he passed, his accountant was asked, how much did he leave behind? And the answer was all of it. Every single bit. All of that fame, all of that fortune, all of that was of no consequence anymore. You try to gain your life, hang on to it, keep it preserved for yourself. Jesus says, you'll end up losing it. Did you ever try to pick up a handful of sand and you find the grain starting to slip out through your fingers? And so you want to hold it tighter, and therefore the pressure's more and more squeezes out? That's the image, right? I'm going to get my life. I'm going to hang on to it. I'm going to keep it. I'm going to make sure everything stays in order. I'm just going to ignore all the messy parts so that I can be. But Jesus says, when you give it to me, when you open your hand, that's when you get your life. That's when you get it, not as you think it should be, but as I mean for it to be. And could you just allow yourself this possibility that what God means for it to be is even better than your fondest dreams and your fondest hopes and your fondest imaginations? God does for us more than what we can ask for or imagine when this power of his life is at work within us. What do you gain if your attention's been on this physical world all your life and you forget about your soul? It's not saying you have to choose attention to one or the other, but it's saying keep the order here, keep the priority here. What's happening to your soul? The soul, your mind, your will, your emotions. That we're becoming disciples of Jesus in our mind, that our thoughts are being transformed in the way we think, in the way we understand who God is, but that in our emotions as well, that they're not staying broken and messed up and dysfunctional, but that we're bringing them into the healing light of God's love and purpose and grace, and then our will, that we actually take it and put it into practice. The will's the part that says, I will do it. I will put it into practice. I will get up out of my easy chair and go walk the dog and not pretend I'm forgetting about it so that June has to do it instead. Stuff like that, you know. So our minds trained, our emotions trained, and our wills trained. And our cohorts are designed around that. We have cohorts that are working on our minds, and then we have cohorts, and I keep looking to you, Miss Melissa, when we're talking about these cohorts like emotionally healthy spirituality and healing as a choice and those kinds of things that are really working at our emotions, because that's part of our discipleship as well, so that our souls, think of it like this, your soul is to be presented before God someday. And so why not be investing in it right now? In your heart, in your will, in your emotions, in the way that you receive and experience this new life that God has for you. So we're going to go into worship. And the song that we're going to sing is Behold the Lamb. Is that right, faithful? Still on Jesus Messiah, and then Behold the Lamb. And so here's the question this morning. Jesus is standing before you saying, who do you say that I am? Will you give me your soul for me to heal, save, make whole, so that you can have dynamic life with me now and for all of eternity?